All right, friends, we're going to do a Photoshop rendering this week, and you're looking at the project. It looks maybe a little complicated, but I think we're going to break it down and try and make it a little bit easier here. We're going to use similar techniques to what we've used in previous lessons, but I'm also going to show you a few new things to help make that rendering look like a rendering. So we're going to start by examining the image here, looking at what you have to work with. We have our background layer to start with, and pretty much a clean line drawing here. This drawing was created in Vectorworks. It was a 3D model that I created just especially for this project. So we have our theater space here around the edges. The front edge of the stage would be this line right here. So our stage floor itself is this area in the front. Couple of levels leading up to some tall square column type blocks. A couple of broken walls here with a bit of a diagonal cut to them, and some ribs, if you will, in the back. We're going to treat the legs and the borders and whatnot just like standard curtains, at least I am. So we'll go through this. I'll probably either fast forward or pause so I can get some of the work done, and you don't have to sit here in the video watching me do it. So hopefully that's a good thing. The first step in this process is to make different selections for each of the components here, and we're going to treat the legs and borders as if they're not getting broken up by some of these elements, and then we'll deal with how they layer once we get into our layers here. So the first thing is just to start making selections, and I'm going to use the magic wand tool, and these individual selections are going to help to maintain our layers. Now, with this line drawing the way it is, it's pretty easy to just make quick selections. So if you'd rather not go through all of this process right away, you can probably stagger the process. But for me, I just find it easier to go ahead and get all the selections made, save them, and then I can work on my layers a lot easier. So I'm going to start with the stage floor and then sort of these outside walls. This is just sort of to help frame the image here. And because of the line drawing, I'm going to zoom in real close here so you can see what I'm talking about. So see how that line, because of the magic wand tool, it just selects right up to the line and not on top of the line. That may pose us some problems later on. So I'm going to go ahead and expand that selection just a little bit. So go under Select, to modify and expand, and I'm going to expand by 2 pixels. It won't completely encompass this real thick line we have here, but it does a pretty good job on some of these smaller ones. So I'm going to use that expand by 2 pixels pretty regularly throughout this process of selecting, so that when I am finished with this, I won't have white lines basically, or black lines surrounding everything, making it look far more cartoonish than I might want. So I've got made that selection, and I'm just going to go ahead in here and do Save Selection. I'm going to name it, let's call it Theater Frame. You can name it whatever you want. Just name it something that is obvious so that if you go looking for it later on, it will be easy to find. Once I say OK, and if I go in here under the channels, you can see that selection has been saved as a separate channel. We'll get into what that means later on. All right, so next I'm going to go ahead and maybe make all these borders a particular selection. Now this first border has a little bit of a squirrely edge here. That's because it was curtains in the Vectorworks project, and it comes through as a curly line here. That will, be important, not important. It will help define that edge a little bit better, but there we go. So again, modify, expand, and save. And I'm going to call this border 1. And again, you just double check, and there it is. So as you go through this process and save each one of these things, now this border, it goes all the way across, so that's good. As you go through this process, it's pretty much the same thing. Select, modify, and save. This one is border number 2. All right, and then this one, I'm going to go ahead and make the selection with the magic wand tool. This border appears to go behind this column here. So I'm going to go ahead just for now, just so that I don't end up with any kind of weird cut in there. Zoom in on that, use my rectangular tool, hold down the Shift key so that it adds to my selection, and add that, and now I'm going to go ahead and expand that whole area. And I'll zoom back out and see, and save. This is border number 3. And the same thing here. Now this one, we can't see the end of it, so this one I think is going to be okay just to include that border up to that edge there. And then for this last one, since it's got a couple of spots, I'm just going to use the rectangular Marquee tool to do this one. Deselect previous, zoom in a little bit, and go ahead and drag this all the way across. This time I'm not going to worry about the expanding. I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that my selection encompasses that line somewhat. I think this was number 5. So if I go look into my channels, I can see I've got border 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to do the same process with the legs, and then I'll start making selections for some of these other things. Okay, so I have made my selections around for all my borders and legs. And so you can see over here in my channels list, I've got border 1 through 5, I've got legs 1, 2, 3, and then I combined legs 4 and 5 because we can only see them on this side, and 5 is such a small little sliver. I don't want to forget about it, but I also don't think I need to make its own, very own selection on there. All right, so next I made the selection for the stage floor, did it in the same way, and now I'm getting into some of these elements from the set itself. So for right now, I'm going to just go ahead and take similar components of each of these um, platforms here. So this is sort of the stage right side of the platforms, and make them their own selection. I can always go back and create new selections if I decide I need to separate them out more. But most likely I'm going to be applying the same textures to these sides, and then I'm keeping them stage right, stage left, so that I can apply different lighting, different levels and whatnot, so that I can make it appear as though they are, lit differently, or that will come into play later on. But for right now, I just want to separate it into these different parts. So I'm using, again, the magic wand tool, selecting all of would be the stage right sides of the platforms, and I need to go ahead and expand. And then save. Again, I can always go back. I'm gonna leave this, make sure I leave this line drawing intact. I'm not gonna do any kind of editing or color addition or anything on there, so that I can always come back to it and make selections later. So these are stage right, platform for the saints. And then I'll do the same thing over here, do the stage left sides. And then the tops will be all one selection as well. Some of these little skinnier places you may need to zoom in if you don't have a big enough section to make that magic wand tool work. And if you end up making a selection that you didn't intend to, just hit Command Z or undo, and it will take just that little bit of selection out of there for you. Notice that when I expanded that, if we look in here, there's a line that separates these two parts. Now it's technically the same level, so I'm okay with that, opening that up. A little bit concerned about it not going into that corner, so hopefully that won't be an issue. Maybe I need to go in and add to that just a little bit, just to make sure it is going to apply my texture when I'm ready to apply that. We'll see if there's any other places like that. Now, this kind of work is why saving selections is important, because if I go ahead and just save it the way it was without adding in these little bits, and or I decide, no, I'm not going to save it, I would have to go in and make these selections every single time. And this is why saved selections is a very useful tool. I'm just going to these really sharp corners just to make sure. Because if this was in the real world, all of these would be, they would be painted all the way to the edge, not just to the little corners. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to go ahead and save this as the platform tops. And I'm just going to go through all of the rest of these things and do something very similar with the each side of the columns. I've got the front facings, and then I've got edges of these little half walls, and then the front and sides of these ribs over here.